Have you ever wondered why some people seem stuck in the same patterns, never learning, never growing, no matter how much life teaches them? It's not about intelligence, it's about wisdom. And here's the truth. Wisdom isn't how much you know, it's how well you live. In this video, we'll uncover 6 powerful signs that someone might be lacking in wisdom. Not to judge, but to reflect. Because in the eyes of Stoic philosophy, self-awareness is the first step toward a better, calmer, and more meaningful life. If you see yourself in any of these signs, don't worry. That's the good news. Recognition is the beginning of transformation. Number 1, a closed mind. A closed mind is the first and most limiting sign of a person who is lacking in wisdom. Unlike ignorance, which is simply a lack of knowledge, a closed mind is the refusal to even consider the possibility that one might be wrong or that there's something new to be learned. It's a subtle but deeply rooted mindset that quietly resists growth, not because the individual can't learn, but because they've convinced themselves there's nothing left to learn. This resistance is often disguised as confidence, decisiveness, or strong principles. But in reality, it's usually rooted in fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of feeling uncertain, fear of losing control. A closed mind is terrified of ambiguity, and so it seeks refuge in rigid beliefs and predictable routines. But here's what the Stoics knew, and what many forget today. Certainty is often an illusion. The only thing we can truly control is how we respond to the ever-changing world around us. Epictetus, one of the great voices of Stoicism, once warned, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." This quote should be written on the walls of every classroom, every boardroom, and even every home. Why? Because it reminds us that the biggest obstacle to growth isn't lack of opportunity, it's arrogance. The belief that you've already figured it all out shuts the door on wisdom before it even has a chance to knock. A closed mind refuses to listen, really listen, to opposing viewpoints. It jumps to conclusions. It interrupts. It treats unfamiliar ideas as threats rather than as chances to expand one's understanding. And worst of all, it becomes addicted to being right. This addiction feeds the ego but starves the soul. It creates an inner echo chamber where only familiar thoughts are allowed to survive. Over time, this builds a mental prison, one where the bars are invisible, but the freedom to grow is completely gone. But the Stoics teach us something profoundly different. To them, wisdom isn't about clinging to your beliefs. It's about examining them. Life is fluid. Nature is in constant motion. So too must our minds be. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands, unmoved and unshaken. But notice, he wasn't saying be the wave or be rigid. He was pointing to resilience, not resistance. A wise mind doesn't fear new information. It absorbs it, reflects on it, and evolves through it. To cultivate an open mind is not to surrender your principles or become easily swayed. It's to have the courage to hold your beliefs up to the fire and see which ones survive. It's the willingness to say, "I don't know," and mean it. And it's the strength to grow when new truth finds you. In daily life, an open mind looks like this: asking instead of assuming, listening instead of interrupting, admitting when you're wrong, and being curious enough to wonder what else you might be wrong about. That's not weakness. That's true strength. Because the person who is always certain never changes, and the person who never changes can never grow. So ask yourself honestly, When was the last time you changed your mind about something important? When was the last time you let someone else teach you something, without defensiveness or resistance? If it's been a while, that's not a failure, that's an opportunity. Modern Stoicism doesn't ask us to abandon who we are, it asks us to refine who we are. And that journey begins with an open mind. Because the moment you admit you don't know everything, you've already taken your first step toward wisdom. Number 2, constant blaming. Blaming others is one of the most deceptive and damaging habits of a person lacking wisdom. On the surface, it feels justified. When something goes wrong, when you're hurt, rejected, misunderstood, or things don't go your way, it's easy, even comforting, to point the finger outward. It's their fault. The world is unfair. I would have succeeded if it weren't for them. This mindset may temporarily shield your ego, but in the long run, it strips you of power, responsibility, and most importantly, growth. The Stoics believed that true wisdom begins the moment we stop blaming the external world and start taking ownership of our inner life. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And that's where the heart of this lesson lies. Blaming is a form of emotional laziness. It's a refusal to look inward and ask the harder question. What part did I play in this? Or, what can I learn from this experience? No matter who was at fault, blaming others keeps you stuck. It locks you into the role of a victim, dependent on other people's actions for your happiness or peace. It also breeds resentment, a poisonous emotion that clouds judgment, damages relationships, and corrodes the soul over time. The wise person, guided by Stoic principles, understands that life will always bring challenges. People will disappoint. Your circumstances will fall apart. But the only thing you ever truly own is your response. And in that space between stimulus and response is where your freedom lives. When someone is always blaming others, they're not just avoiding responsibility, they're avoiding reality. And the more they do it, the more they disconnect from the lessons that failure and discomfort are trying to teach them. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reminds us that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In other words, the blame game is not only a waste of time, it's a surrender of your potential. Now, this doesn't mean you should excuse bad behavior or accept injustice. It means recognizing that while you cannot always control what happens to you, you can always control what you do with it. You can choose to dwell in bitterness, or you can choose to rise in clarity. Wisdom lies in choosing the latter. Here's a hard truth. Every time you point a finger at someone else, 3 fingers point back at you. That's not just a cliche, it's a reminder. A wise person sees mistakes and setbacks as mirrors, not weapons. They ask, what does this reveal about me? What can I do differently next time? And how can I grow from this? Constant blaming is a sign of emotional immaturity, but it's also a doorway. If you're willing to stop, reflect, and take ownership, even of just 1% of the problem, you begin reclaiming your power. The Stoics didn't teach passivity, they taught responsibility. Radical responsibility. The kind that doesn't wait for apologies, doesn't depend on perfect conditions, and doesn't look for someone to rescue you. So next time you're tempted to blame someone else for how you feel, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what is this really about? What am I avoiding by shifting the blame? The more honest your answer, the more powerful your growth. Wisdom doesn't come from having a perfect life. It comes from owning your imperfect one. And nothing accelerates that journey more than dropping the blame and picking up responsibility. That's where true transformation begins. Number 3, arrogance. Arrogance is one of the most deceptive signs of a lack of wisdom because it often wears the mask of strength. To the outside world, the arrogant person appears confident, self-assured, and unshakable. But look closer, and you'll often find someone deeply insecure, someone who clings to superiority, not because they feel powerful, but because they fear being powerless. Arrogance isn't a sign of inner strength. It's a defense mechanism, a shield against vulnerability and the unknown. In Stoic philosophy, wisdom and arrogance cannot coexist. Wisdom requires openness, humility, and a willingness to be corrected. Arrogance rejects all of that. It thrives on the illusion of certainty, the belief that one already knows enough, that one's opinions are inherently superior, and that learning from others is beneath them. This mindset is poison to personal growth. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor of Rome, wrote in his meditations about the constant need to remain humble, to remind himself that status and praise were fleeting illusions, and that no title or achievement should ever make him immune to self-reflection. Arrogance blocks wisdom at the source because it stops the flow of new information. When you believe you already know everything, you stop asking questions. When you feel superior to others, you stop listening to them. And when your ego demands to be right all the time, you stop learning from your mistakes. The Stoics believed that self-awareness was the foundation of all virtue. But arrogance blinds you to your own flaws. It creates an echo chamber where only your own voice matters. And that is a dangerous place to live. Seneca, another great Stoic thinker, once said, "The first step towards learning is the recognition of one's own ignorance." Arrogance is the refusal to take that step. It confuses loudness with wisdom, dominance with knowledge, and inflexibility with strength. But real wisdom, true Stoic wisdom, is quiet, patient, and adaptable. It does not fear being wrong. It welcomes correction, because every correction is a step closer to truth. Think of the arrogant person in a conversation. They interrupt. They talk more than they listen. They reject advice not because it's wrong, but because it didn't come from them. They inflate their accomplishments and downplay the wisdom of others. All of this stems from a fragile ego that fears being exposed. But ironically, it's this very mindset that prevents them from growing stronger. Because if you're always performing, you're never improving. The Stoic way encourages a different path. It teaches us to embrace humility not as weakness, but as strength. The Stoic knows that every person they meet, regardless of status or background, has something to teach them. Every disagreement is an opportunity to sharpen their thinking. Every failure is a classroom in disguise. This is not passive submission. It's active learning. It's the discipline to hold your ego in check and choose understanding over pride. And there's a profound freedom in that. When you let go of the need to be right, you open yourself to everything that can make you better. When you stop seeing disagreement as an attack and start seeing it as a gift, you stop fighting battles that don't matter. The arrogant person is always in conflict with others, with reality, with themselves. But the wise person is at peace because they have nothing to prove and everything to learn. So how do we overcome arrogance? It starts with honest self-examination. Ask yourself, do I listen to understand, or just to reply? Do I ask questions, or just wait for my turn to speak? When was the last time I admitted I was wrong and meant it? These questions are not always easy to face, but they are essential. Because every moment you trade arrogance for humility, you gain something far more powerful than pride. You gain clarity. In the end, arrogance is a ceiling you build for yourself. It may feel like protection, but it's really a prison. Humility tears that ceiling down and replaces it with an open sky. The Stoics understood this deeply. To be wise, you must be teachable. And to be teachable, you must first let go of the illusion that you already know it all. Only then can true growth begin. Number 4, lack of empathy. A person may be intelligent, skilled, or even accomplished, but if they lack empathy, they lack one of the most essential qualities of wisdom. Empathy is not just about feeling sorry for someone. It's the ability to step outside of yourself and into the emotional world of another person. To understand, not just intellectually, but emotionally, what someone else might be going through. Without this ability, relationships become transactional, interactions become shallow, and the person's view of the world becomes dangerously narrow. The Stoics believed in the unity of humankind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings no benefit to the bee." This powerful metaphor reminds us that we are part of something larger than ourselves. To isolate ourselves from the needs, struggles, and emotions of others is to cut ourselves off from our own humanity. When someone lacks empathy, they cannot connect deeply with others. They don't know how to truly listen, how to offer comfort, or how to act with compassion. And ultimately, they become blind to how their actions affect the people around them. Lack of empathy often stems from ego, indifference, or fear. Some people build emotional walls because they don't want to deal with the discomfort of someone else's pain. Others were never taught to explore their own emotions, so they instinctively shut down when someone else becomes vulnerable. In modern life, this disconnection is sometimes praised. People call it being rational or keeping things professional. But make no mistake, empathy is not weakness. It's the foundation of trust, community, and wisdom. Imagine a leader who makes decisions without considering the people affected, or a friend who only talks about themselves and never asks how you're doing, or a person who sees others in pain and says, "That's not my problem." These are all signs of a stunted emotional life. They might be masked by efficiency or ambition, but in truth, they reveal a lack of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is an inseparable part of wisdom. The Stoics didn't preach cold detachment from people. They encouraged detachment from irrational emotions and toxic attachments, yes, but they also spoke deeply about duty to others. Epictetus said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." That tolerance, that compassion, that human understanding, that's empathy. It means allowing others to be imperfect. It means being kind even when it's not convenient. It means realizing that everyone is fighting a battle you cannot see. Empathy also fosters humility. When you take time to understand someone else's experience, especially someone you disagree with, you realize just how limited your own perspective really is. You realize that your judgments, your assumptions, and your quick conclusions are often wrong. Empathy invites patience. It helps us pause before reacting, listen before speaking, and seek understanding before casting blame. But empathy isn't just about feelings. It's also about action. The Stoics valued justice, and justice begins with recognizing what others need. It's not enough to say, "I understand." You must also ask, "How can I help?" Even small acts of empathy, listening without interrupting, acknowledging someone's pain, standing up for someone who's vulnerable, can have ripple effects far beyond what you see. When a person lacks empathy, they not only hurt others, they also limit their own growth. Because without understanding others, you cannot fully understand yourself. You miss out on the deep, transformational insights that come from seeing life through another person's eyes. So if you notice this sign in yourself, emotional detachment, impatience with others' struggles, or coldness when someone opens up, don't judge yourself. Just recognize it, reflect on it, and ask, where can I open my heart a little more? Where can I choose to understand rather than ignore? Empathy doesn't always come naturally, especially in a world that rewards speed and selfishness. But it is something you can build, with practice, with intention, and with courage. To be wise is not just to think clearly, it is to feel deeply and to act with compassion. Without empathy, intelligence becomes manipulation. Ambition becomes cruelty, and strength becomes tyranny. But with empathy, we reconnect with our highest potential, not just as thinkers, but as human beings. Number 5. Fear of change. Change is inevitable. It's the one constant in life. And yet, for many people, change is terrifying. They resist it, fight it, deny it, clinging tightly to what's familiar, even when it no longer serves them. This fear of change is one of the clearest signs of a person who lacks wisdom, because it reveals an unwillingness to grow, to adapt, and to face reality as it is. To fear change is, in many ways, to fear life itself, because life is change. Seasons shift, people evolve, circumstances transform. And while it's natural to feel uneasy about uncertainty, the wise person doesn't try to stop the tide. Instead, they learn to surf it. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly when he wrote, "Observe constantly that all things take place by change, and accustom yourself to consider that the nature of the universe loves nothing so much as to change the things which are, and to make new things like them." In Stoicism, change is not something to fear, it is something to embrace. Why? Because every change, no matter how difficult, is an opportunity. An opportunity to test your character, to learn something new, to discover a strength you didn't know you had. The obstacle is not something that blocks the path, it is the path. As Marcus put it, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is perhaps one of the most powerful Stoic teachings. Fear of change isn't just irrational, it's self-sabotage. Those who fear change often crave control. They want predictability, certainty, safety. But the truth is, none of those things truly exist. You can have routines, plans, even long-term visions, but life will still throw curveballs. People will leave, jobs will end, illness will come, success will fade. Trying to cling to stability in an ever-changing world is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. Wisdom is learning to live with open hands, to welcome change as a teacher, not a threat. To say, I may not have chosen this, but I will respond to it with strength and grace. The unwise person avoids change because it makes them uncomfortable. The wise person leans into that discomfort, knowing that on the other side is a stronger version of themselves. Look at your own life. What are you clinging to out of fear? A relationship that's no longer healthy? A job that drains your soul? A routine that's keeping you small? If your answer is yes, it's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're human. But ask yourself this: what would happen if I stopped resisting and started trusting? Not trusting blindly, but trusting that even the hardest transitions can shape you into someone better. Fear of change can also stem from the ego's need for identity. People say things like, "I've always been this way," or "This is just who I am." But the truth is, identity is not fixed. You're allowed to evolve. In fact, you're supposed to. The Stoics didn't see life as a rigid formula. They saw it as a constant act of becoming. Wisdom is not about standing still, it's about moving forward no matter how uncertain the path. The fear of change whispers lies. It says you're not ready. It says you'll fail. It says it's too late. But the wise person knows that fear is just a signal, not a stop sign. It's a call to pay attention, not to retreat. The very thing you're afraid of might be the thing that sets you free. So if you see this sign in yourself or others, this resistance to change, don't judge. Just become curious. What's really behind that fear? Is it the fear of losing control? Of being uncomfortable? Of having to let go of something familiar? Once you name it, you can face it. And once you face it, you can transcend it. In the end, the wise person understands this simple truth. Change is not the enemy. Stagnation is. Growth demands motion, and motion demands courage. The Stoic doesn't just endure change, they use it, because they know that every storm, every disruption, every ending is also a beginning. Number 6, talking more than listening. There's a reason we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. Yet for many people the ratio is reversed. They dominate conversations, interrupt others, and speak before they think. They treat every interaction as an opportunity to assert their opinion, rather than understand someone else's. This is not wisdom, it's ego in disguise. And it's one of the most common signs of a person who is not truly wise. Talking more than listening stems from a deep-seated need to be heard, to be seen as knowledgeable, or simply to feel important. But the truth is, the wise person doesn't need to prove themselves in every conversation. They understand that real power lies in listening, not passive hearing, but active, respectful, intentional listening. The kind of listening that builds connection, reveals truth, and invites learning. Stoic philosophy teaches us that wisdom begins with silence. Epictetus famously said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just a clever observation. It was a roadmap for living well. Because when you listen, truly listen, you gain access to something more valuable than your own voice, the perspective of others. When someone constantly talks, they leave no room for learning. They miss nuances. They overlook insights. They assume rather than inquire. And perhaps most tragically, they fail to make others feel heard, a basic human need. People remember how you made them feel, and nothing is more powerful than the feeling of being genuinely listened to. The person who talks too much often believes they're leading the conversation, but in reality they're just blocking it. Listening requires humility. It requires the recognition that you don't have all the answers, and that wisdom can come from the most unexpected sources. Whether it's a child, a stranger, or even someone you disagree with, Every person has something to teach you, if you're willing to be quiet long enough to hear it. And listening isn't just about waiting for your turn to speak. It's about setting aside your mental script, being present, and asking, "What can I learn here?" It means asking questions instead of offering quick solutions. It means noticing what's not being said as much as what is. The Stoics practiced this through reflection and self-restraint. They understood that the tongue is a powerful tool, but also a dangerous one when used carelessly. In today's world, where opinions are broadcast constantly and everyone seems to be shouting to be heard, the ability to listen deeply is rare and valuable. It's a mark of emotional intelligence, of maturity, of genuine wisdom. The person who listens more than they speak becomes a magnet for trust. People are drawn to them, not because they always have the answers, but because they make others feel understood. So if you catch yourself talking over people, rushing to respond, or dominating discussions, pause. Ask yourself, am I speaking to connect or to control? Remember, silence is not weakness, it's a sign of discipline. It creates space for clarity. It honors the dignity of the person in front of you. The Stoic path is not about proving how much you know. It's about seeking truth, understanding yourself and others, and mastering the impulses that cloud your judgment. Listening is not passive, it's powerful. It cultivates patience, presence, and wisdom. And those who develop this habit become not only better communicators, but better people. In the end, it's not the loudest voice that commands respect. It's the quiet presence that listens with intention, responds with thoughtfulness, and learns from every moment. Wisdom isn't found in talking, it's revealed in listening. To wrap up, recognizing these 6 signs, closed-mindedness, constant blaming, arrogance, lack of empathy, fear of change, and talking more than listening, isn't about judging others or labeling anyone as stupid. It's about honest self-reflection and the commitment to grow. Modern Stoicism teaches us that wisdom isn't something we're born with. It's something we cultivate through awareness and action. When you identify these patterns in yourself, you take the first courageous step toward transformation. Embrace the discomfort of change, listen more deeply, open your heart to others, and take full responsibility for your life. That's how true wisdom begins, not in knowing everything, but in striving to become better every day.